Welcome everybody to the STEAM Provider Midwife panel. This year for STEAM Awareness Week, I was interested in highlighting some of the different STEAM providers out there. I think when it comes to steaming, several years ago, it was like, steaming? Like, what are we steaming? Like, we're steaming the vagina? What? You know, there was kind of like that like shell shock factor and kind of like giddiness around like, are people really doing that? Is that really a thing? And it is. It's really a thing. We're really out here doing it. And I think people are getting used to it now, especially as it's become, I think it's becoming more and more commonplace among spas in particular, you know. But that said, the steaming that you receive at the spa, those steam providers are different steam providers than midwife steam providers, right? And so I've just been kind of highlighting, and I think the spa steam providers are amazing because to me, they're the ones that really introduce steaming into a lot of neighborhoods and communities that wouldn't know about it otherwise, you know? Yeah. But then there's something very unique about what the midwife steam providers offer. I don't know the total number of midwife steam providers that we have. I know that Raquel Limes, formerly Limes, who goes by Raquel Coexitlali, she was the first midwife who was like, yeah, that makes sense. Steaming should be one of my tools, you know, one of my tools in my, you guys have a bag, right? In my midwife bag, you know? And so she was the first midwife that really, you know, started to talk about it and integrate it into her practice and the care that she offered to her clients, as well as her own personal health. And then since then, slowly, more midwives have entered the community. And I think it was actually doulas who really came into the community more enthusiastically, you know, who were like, steam? Okay, cool, let's try it, you know, like, and then I think midwives were able to doulas were able to kind of educate midwives about it, you know, since they work closely. At least that's like my impression of kind of like how this happened. But it's interesting because midwives are, I think, the original STEAM practitioners. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah.
So I can't wait for people to meet you. And so we'll have people meet you in a second. Everybody, sorry, I have to point this way. Amber Adams is a midwife and a STEAM practitioner. And so we'll meet her and learn more about her and how she offers steaming and so forth. But just to go back to that point, I started to collect records of steaming around the world. And so I have found over 70 records of steaming around the world. Some of these are firsthand accounts, you know, somebody in Cambodia who's like, yes, I steamed after I gave birth. I steamed for 90 days straight. You know, a taxi driver who was like, oh, yes, they do that we do that in Rwanda, you know, and just different firsthand accounts too. Also like ancient textbooks and records from the Egyptian pyramids to, traditional Chinese medicine, ancient textbooks and remedies, herbal formulas for steaming and so forth. Like everywhere where you go back to early gynecology, you can find records of steaming, right? But the majority of the records of steaming around the world, it's a midwife who's doing the steaming and she's doing it postpartum. Like that is the one use of it that is universal. There are other places where it's used maybe for period care, or maybe it's used for infections or, you know, different things. But the one that's universal is postpartum care. And it was often the midwives that were doing it. And I kind of really keyed in when I was looking for records of steaming that you have to ask the midwives. So like maybe, you know, if I meet somebody from the Philippines, maybe they've never heard of steaming. But if I meet a midwife, if I can talk to a midwife and I can ask what, you know, the prior midwives used to do or what, you know, what the older midwives used to do, I say, oh, they used to see, right? Like, so it was, I found out it's like especially the elder midwives of the planet that still have a lot of knowledge about steaming, and also still implement it, and still train, the people who train under them, they would teach it. So they're the ones who have really handed it down over the generations. So it's so crazy. I'm not a midwife or a doula, everybody, just so you know, I'm not a birth worker at all. um, I'm actually a little bit scared of birth. I was actually at the hospital the other day and the maternity ward, and somebody was like starting to get to where she was crowning, and she was like, calling out, and I was just like, okay, I gotta go. I'm going to the waiting room. I've always been like that, so I'm actually really grateful for birth workers and the work that you guys do, and that you're willing to be with women at uh, this event, or this that is like so transformational, where you're just really at the edge of life and death is what it feels like. That's why I'm scared, every time I'm around it. And that you guys do that for people and walk them through that. So anyhow, so let's meet Amber. Anyway, so okay, so it's full circle. It's really interesting to me that ultimately I was able to educate a number of midwives about steaming, and then that steaming is now starting to spread in the U.S. among the I want to say resurgence of midwifery here in the United States, which is obviously a different practice than how it was historically. Then it got cut off, and now there's a resurgence and a immersion of the midwives. And then now there's also been this remembrance of steaming, and so now we see the steaming getting integrated again. And I want to hear about your journey as a midwife. How did you become a midwife? How long have you been a midwife? And then we'll talk about how you've been able to learn about steaming and integrate it and how it works for your clients and stuff.
Cool. Yeah. So I'm Amber, as you guys have heard. I've been a midwife for about 10 years, a little less, like depending on where you count it. I served as a doula before, and so I did 2 doula births and was like, no, I cannot function in this system because most, they were 2 hospital births, and it was too hard to walk that. So I wanted to create a space where I could take care of people in a different way, in a more embodied and like holistic way. So I almost immediately started toward midwifery. I've been running my own practice for a few years now. We focus on only home birth, and I launched in 2019, so right before the pandemic hit, which was kind of a wild time to, launch a new practice, but it was cool because a lot more people were interested in out of hospital at that time. So I think
Yeah.
it gave us a bigger platform than we would have gotten otherwise. So, there, I guess, a silver lining and something so chaotic, right?
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, so I've just kind of been doing my home birth thing for a while, and I don't take on a ton of clients, just about 4 a month. So just, a little bit at a time. I have 4 kids, and so I still want to be mom and not be gone all the time. And, so that's where I found my balance. As far as steaming goes, I was trying to think about, like, after you had asked me this, I was trying to think how I even found you. And it's just like all of a sudden, one day Kelly was there with her steaming knowledge. Like it was just all of a sudden there. And I first did just the facilitator training. I just knew that that was something I wanted to do, but I wasn't really sure how it would mesh with midwifery work at that point. I was like, this is just something I enjoy doing for myself and would like to teach people about. And I have a really deep respect for herbs, so I didn't want to just, throw together my own formulation and take it out there, because I think that because we're rediscovering this wisdom, this herbal wisdom, we tend to approach it from a very like Western mentality of, if, this is effective, then I'm going to get really heavy-handed and just put every herb I know of in there, right? Without really considering the consequences. And so I did
Yeah.
not want to do that. I wanted to have your knowledge to kind of help guide me through that. And then I think after I finished the facilitator training, I saw the labor prep package and was like, oh, like this sounds really cool because it just is such a gentle nudge. It's not induction, which we had that interaction on Instagram, which I mean, I guess we can talk about that as we go. But yeah, that was the thing that really helped me see there is a direct spot in my field where I can bring this to everybody because I as even though postpartum is the more common time for steaming around the world, I found that here it tends to be the option that people are less drawn to. Whereas the labor prep, they're more like, yes. Yeah, isn't that fascinating?
Oh, I found that too. I'm
Yeah,
just so shocked that more people are like setting up to make sure that they can steam postpartum.
I know.
What I hear them say is, "Oh, okay, well, if I need it, then I'll
Yes, yeah.
be in contact." It's like if you need it, like
Yeah. I know. So it's been really fascinating because I fully expected it to be, traditionally like that's what people were drawn to, right? And but yeah, that is not the case right now. And I have ideas about it, which, we can talk about that as well if you want.
yeah,
But
yeah. Why do you
so
think that is?
I
Okay, yeah.
think it's because we are kind of culturally uh impatient for labor to start, right? So it's like, induction at 39 weeks. And when you're coming at it from this different mindset of, I want to do things naturally and unmedicated or whatever, but you still have this little voice in your head of like, I would like to be done, right? And so I think that kind of opens the door for it.
Wait, is that the accent the little voice in your head has?
Yeah,
Is that
yeah. I do have little,
I would like to be done, please?
yeah, yeah. It's very polite, this little inner voice of mine. So yeah, I just think that um yeah, I think there's this like priming, I guess, for the labor prep. And even though with my clients, I stress this is not induction. This is just, like the slippery baby thing. Like it's um I still think that it feels good for them to take an active stance, I guess, at that point in pregnancy. So, yeah, I think it has all to do with that. Whereas the postpartum, we just want it over and sitting and doing steaming every day for 30 days. People are just like, oh, I've got stuff to do. I don't want to. So I think it's just this whole cultural thing, which is unfortunate. And I am working on that with my clients. We talk a lot about that 30 days being, you're still in between planes. Like you said, you're on the cusp of life and death. And you're still in it for a while unless you are really mindfully like closing those gates and stepping into this plane, right? So I think steaming is a really beautiful way to do that.
That's I think rings very true about the impatience. But I'm also thinking it probably has to do with the focus on the baby,
Mm,
right? What is postpartum? It's like, okay,
yeah.
you ready to get your baby, right?
Hmm.
So during pregnancy, you see a baby shower. During pregnancy, you see, you know, oh, sit down, put your feet up, right? And we don't see that in postpartum, right?
Mm-mm.
And so to me, it's like, oh, hopefully trying to imbue the culture with more of that, right? But it's like, I think it's when a woman is pregnant, there's the focus on the baby surviving childbirth and her
Absolutely.
surviving childbirth. But like really it has a lot to do with the baby
Hmm.
and a healthy baby being born. Whereas postpartum,
Yeah,
we're not talking about,
we're
people
not.
don't have the tie, between having a healthy mom at that point, and a
Mm,
healthy baby. But it's just like I think as women, I think women are taught to be very self-sacrificing.
Absolutely.
And so, the idea, you still have that task at hand to give birth, right? So
Mhm.
now it's like, what can I do, to
Yeah.
give birth in a better way, right?
Yeah, in a better way. Oh, that is like the
Yeah.
nail on the head.
Yeah. Like,
Yeah.
how can I do it as a good girl, right? Like we're
Hmm.
also trying to be good girls. Okay, is this okay? I can steam, and get this, baby born healthy, like that's like I don't want to say that our society, I think me and you, I think I'm older than you, but either way, I'm from the 80s and grew
Yeah,
up at
same.
that time, was taught that, girls can do anything and, have a higher degree education. And I always just thought that this was a true buy-in until until I saw people who couldn't get pregnant.
Hmm.
And then all of a sudden, whether these women had PhDs or not, it was just like, her life wasn't fulfilled. She didn't
Yeah.
produce what she was supposed to in life.
Mhm.
And so it's like I think we talk about the importance of a woman in relation to her ability to produce a baby.
Absolutely.
And
Hmm.
pregnancy and leading up to pregnancy and giving birth is all still that.
Oh, very
But
much so.
postpartum is not.
Hmm.
As long as the baby's healthy,
Yep,
why would this woman then spend time healing herself? You
exactly.
see, it shows how much we don't value the mother. It shows
Hmm.
how much we just value her role as a reproducer, you know?
Absolutely. Hmm. And I think that's why the postpartum steaming is such an upward almost battle, right? Because we're trying to change people's minds about their beliefs around postpartum when they've had their whole life to inform how they're going to approach that period of time. And, in my
Yeah.
case, I'm meeting them at the beginning of their pregnancy. Sometimes, we're getting repeat clients or whatever. Um, but I only have, 8 months to really say, okay, like like deprogram all of that, right? And it's just not, I I do my best, but honestly, there's only so much I can do, right? And I think it's the cultural narrative needs to shift. And in situations like yours, like I think it's really important to talk about this self-care practice that you can do and have kind of a general knowledge about it because that it's important and we just are neglecting it. And I think that's why we have such high rates of perinatal depression and yeah, all that.
That's what I was about to say.
Yeah.
And then everybody's just bewildered. Oh my gosh, why are all the moms depressed? Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, these moms are so depressed. I mean, they're so depressed, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's we're in the trenches.
The depression is just going up,
Mhm.
and I just laugh not to cry. But how
Exactly. That's
often
all you
is
can do.
that true?
Yeah.
Like, I didn't know how serious it was, like serious levels of
Yeah.
depression, like to
Yeah.
the point of, suicide, right? Like, I mean, like really, really bad.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I think it really comes from not slowing down in those first little bits. Like, you talk a lot about Chinese medicine and how that interplays with steaming, right? And in Chinese medicine, birth is like a cooling event and you have to restore that heat. And like, I can't tell you how often I see, it's like someone's just had a baby and they're like, oh, go get me a smoothie. And I swear to you, it starts right then because it's this mentality of like, I can eat something really quick and nobody has to like put that much effort into me. And, um, it just seems like not a big ask. And it's so, I don't know how to tie what I'm trying to say here, but I just think that even from those first moments, that first hour, you can tell who is going to struggle based on what care they allow to receive for themselves and what
Interesting.
care they ask for. And I
Wow.
think when we're kind of approaching birth from this disembodied place of um just fulfilling a task, right? Like, hey, check, I've given birth, right? And now it's on with my life. Um, I think we see that disconnect in the foods they're craving. I know that's like probably way out there, right? But I really do think that the people who are more in tune with what their body needs, they're
Yeah.
asking for soup, they're asking for like a blanket, they're asking for, this warm thing. So then I think the natural extension is steaming, right? So then you're continuing that through the postpartum. But again, it's just we're disconnected from that. And I think that that's a big call to action for us as people who are aware of steaming. I think that's something that we can do, even if we're not midwives, even if we're not even doulas, right? If you have a neighbor who's given birth, you can say, here, I have this gift for you. I will
Yeah.
do a load of laundry. I'll hold your baby. You go sit on this steam chair,
Yeah.
or even take the baby and nurse, like whatever, as long as you're sitting down. You know,
Yes, yes. I love that. And it's so simple. And honestly, it feels so good. And that's actually, that is how, that's my exposure to birth work, is that I'm that person. I'm that friend that, okay, so my friend gives birth, I take my steam chair and I go and I do a steam for her. And like, you become that person's like favorite person
yeah,
ever just because it feels so good.
it
You
does. It
know,
feels
like
so good. Yeah.
it feels so good. Oh, that's so cool. I love that. Okay, yes. Okay, so we had some thoughts about that.
Yeah,
Labor
yeah,
versus
some thoughts.
postpartum.
Yeah. I have some fun ADHD and I will take us on some tangents. So just
It's okay. This is informal, and
yeah,
I don't have any structure to how this is going to go. I just wanted to have a conversation
I love it.
um, with a steamy midwife.
Yeah.
So, so you feel like so you learned about steaming for labor, and then you were able to see how it integrated with your work as a midwife,
Mhm.
and you also feel like that's where your clients were interested.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, so how many of your clients opt to do the labor steaming?
All of them. Like every single one. Yeah.
Oh wow!
It's so cool. So I didn't make it an extra part of my package. I just
Yeah.
was like, because I don't want cost to be a barrier to this. I
Okay.
just think it's accessibility is so important and people are already paying out of pocket for midwifery care, right?
100%.
So I just wanted it wrapped in. So all of my clients, they all just get it. And I mean, there's varying levels of follow through, right? But every single one of them at least does it a couple times and they love it. And the results I see are really cool too. So I
What?
love it as a midwife. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Let's.
what was that?
Okay, so logistically, how does that happen? Like, is there a certain week that you do like the first steam session for them, or do you describe to them how to do it and leave herbs with them? How does it look?
Yeah. So what I do is at 36 weeks when we're bringing the birth kit and we're doing the GBS swab and all of that kind of stuff, I bring them a stool and herbs and I send them like we go over it in the visit and then I send them a text with all of the instructions so they can refer to it later. And I've gone through and found like pictures so that people can like get an idea of the setup. Um, just in various things. I found that if you give a pregnant person too many options, they just feel overwhelmed, right? Especially at the end of pregnancy, they're like, I can't even imagine to like envision what that will look like. So I'll send a setup in a bathroom or a setup in their bedroom, just so they have someone else's idea to just recreate, right? And I think that really helps with follow through. Um, and yeah, I just follow your protocol that you teach in the course. And so we don't actually start for a few weeks, but I make sure they have it on hand so that as we're seeing them
Okay.
weekly, I can also kind of adjust their frequency. Like if I have a client who's really swollen, I do actually start steaming a little bit sooner and have them do double sessions a little earlier, just because it gets that pelvic blood flow moving and I feel that it reduces that swelling quite a bit. So,
Wow, I
yeah.
believe it. That's so cool.
Yeah.
So cool. And I completely agree, especially under the care of a midwife, that that's appropriate.
Yeah.
Um, and Yeah, I mean, swelling is one of the biggest things that you see move very quickly. And then also, so I want to say, and I want to just confirm right away. So even though you have somebody start steaming a little bit earlier, it's never initiated.
No, never. I've never had steaming
Okay.
cause labor. Like
Okay.
it's because it's just that's just not what it's doing, right? It's facilitating the process, but it's not inducing. Even when like toward the end of pregnancy, when we're increasing like the oh my gosh, my brain is blinking. When we're doing like the double dose of herbs. Like
Yeah.
a yeah, even then I don't feel like it is actually encouraging labor to start. I think that it is helping in kind of an intangible way because when I have clients that make it that far, like post dates, 40 weeks or whatever, they are their labors unfold so much differently with steaming on board. And I think that's the motherwort in the blend. Just kind of, motherwort is for mothers, right? So in every way. Um, and yeah, so it's cool to see kind of like the nuanced differences. And I will say like when I started out, I followed the protocol like very clearly. And I think that it's an amazing thing to do, right? Especially when you're first learning. But then as you get to know like your herbs and the protocol, you start to kind of have these little intuitive like, oh, this client needs this and this one
Yeah.
needs this. And it, that ties into the whole midwifery like individualized care
Yeah.
aspect, right? So
Yeah.
um, I think if you're coming in and providing that service, it's best to stick to the protocol, right? Because you don't get the same level of involvement, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah. And I think it's really cool to just be able to do that for people.
Oh yeah, 100%. And I actually love hearing that that's happening. The reality is, I'm not a midwife. And so, but I steamed myself during labor twice.
Mhm.
And then, as a steam practitioner, helped people, in labor who didn't have midwives who could help them,
Mhm.
or other care providers,
Yeah.
meaning doctors.
Yeah.
Definitely not, right? And so, I made certain observations and then I created a 4-week labor steam program,
Mhm.
and that is, really a recommendation. And yes, I test everybody, in the class because I want to make sure that everybody, knows that I'm recommending starting at 38 weeks and not 36 weeks, right?
Yes. Hmm.
You gotta understand, I don't screen to make sure that it's only midwives in my class,
Yeah.
like
Yeah. Well, and I think there's
individual
room
pregnant
for just
people.
anyone to do it. Like, I don't think you
Yeah.
have to be a midwife, right? Like, I think it's a really great service for anyone to do it when they approach it with respect, right?
Yeah, yeah. But when you're with a midwife, you have another level of protection. For example, somebody is at 36 weeks and has some active spotting, right? Like,
Mhm.
the midwife's already going to be attending to, that risk factor,
Exactly.
seeing what's going on there. Is there, an issue with the placenta? Is there, you know what I mean? Like there's
Yeah.
going to be another level, right? And so I just wanted to give the absolute safest thing, right?
Yeah.
And
And I
so
think
that's what that.
Yeah, no, and I think you've done a great job of it. I really like when I was taking it, I was like, oh, this is so refreshing because I just think it's kind of what I was saying earlier, that mentality of like that heavy-handed, like, if this is good, I'm going to use twice as much, right? And I think it is the perfect level of um yeah, just introducing the measures to people and giving them that protocol. I really do think it's amazing for anyone to be able to do
Yeah.
that.
But to tell you the truth, the more midwives integrate this, the more I expect that you all will develop it even further.
Yeah, yeah.
Like,
And I do think we will, right?
yeah, I think it's going to be a natural evolution of it, right? And for example, you mentioned GBS swabs,
Mhm.
and like that's one thing that, again, I would never, I'm not in a position that I'm offering that type of care, but like if somebody has a GBS positive, and they steam,
Mhm.
you know, and like you're somebody who could administer another test,
Yeah,
like
exactly.
and
Mhm.
see was there a difference. I've had people who have tried to who have come up positive and used steaming and
Mhm.
tried to get their medical care provider to do another test, and they
Yeah, and
refused.
they
They would
won't.
just not do it.
I know. Well, and it's hard because that test is actually really expensive, which
Is
is
that
so
what it is?
silly.
'Cause they just refuse. Like they were
Yeah,
just like, no
I'm pretty
way.
sure that that's probably what it was. Because even me, and I pay the lab directly and get, um, really good deals, like because I'm
Right.
not billing insurance, right? Like,
Yeah.
but for me, even it's $75. And I
Okay.
would imagine for a hospital-based provider to do it, it's probably at least three times that because they're billing
Okay.
insurance. And so I think that that is probably the biggest factor. And it's also
Okay.
a culture, right? And so, and also, uh, this is one of those things we have to have a whole other conversation on GBS because it's a thing. But I mean, yeah, I've only had two people who have steamed and done the probiotic that I recommend that have tested positive in the last 2 years. So it's one a year. And that was just a more it was also resistant to most of the antibiotics as well. So it was just like a heavy duty strain that they got, right? So I think that in most cases, the steaming does reduce the risk of colonization at the time of birth. So, yeah.
No, you're saying that because your client steamed prior to you taking the swab? Is that what
No, no,
happened?
it tends to be so the way I have it is at 28 weeks they start doing a probiotic and then we test at 36 weeks for it. And if they've
Oh,
tested positive and they do steaming, they don't um we retest and then they don't then it's gone is what I'm trying to say. Other than two times.
so you had somebody positive at 36 weeks, had them steam,
Mhm.
retested, and saw a negative?
Yes. Yes, that's what
Oh
I'm trying to
my
say. Yeah.
gosh.
Yeah.
I have been looking for this type of
Yeah.
case study.
Yeah, and it was like the situation of I just wanted to know if it worked. So I was like, I will cover that cost because I want to know. And obviously it's still anecdotal because it's just one, couple
Yeah.
cases, right? But I do think that if I think it would be such a great thing to implement for GBS clients. So,
I mean, what's the alternative? What's the alternative? Like,
so
they're gonna have to take antibiotics, right? While
yeah,
breastfeeding,
yeah. So
or
no,
what?
so it's
Wait,
in labor. It's in labor. So the kind of worldwide protocol for treating GBS is a prophylactic approach, right? So you need to have at least one dose on board through IV at the time of birth. So if you're giving birth in a hospital, they have you come in pretty early so you can get that in. Um, and with me, we're kind of in touch, right? Like we're already kind of like in and out. And so most of my clients, though, they don't opt for antibiotics and they prefer to do colloidal silver spray for the baby. And there's some nuanced stuff happening here that, you know, again, we'd have to have a whole other conversation about it, right? But I do think that the steaming is such a good approach because it's the other thing that people recommend is doing a hibiclens wash like a couple times a day, and that is just problematic in so many different ways. Like if we're talking about the vaginal flora, like getting a hibiclens wash is just disrupting everything. And you're
Okay.
looking at like, yeast infections postpartum and BV postpartum and other situations when you're already experiencing that lochia and it just is a mess. And so that is, I mean, obviously if a client is really passionate that they want to do that, I'm not going to be like, you shouldn't, but it's not my
Yeah.
favorite option, right? Like I just think that we know enough about it to avoid it. Whereas like IV antibiotics are actually going to be less disruptive of the vaginal flora. because it's so short term.
But you're still not a fan of that if it's not necessary. If you could
Yeah,
get your
exactly.
and do you so you have them do the probiotics, then you have them if they're positive, you have them continue the probiotics. And
Yes, exactly. Yep. So we're not just kind of like, okay, you're positive, we're just giving up, right? We just kind of add on to our efforts. There are lots of other things that you can do. Like some people do garlic cloves in the vagina. And again, that can be problematic because, you know, like how, yeah. Yeah, yeah, like there's so like there's so many. I'm trying to like come up with all the reasons. There's so many. I mean, it burns for one. Like for two.
people, yeah.
Wait, what? You're cutting out a little bit.
People
But
who
yeah,
have tried it, sorry, I didn't say people who have tried it, it sounds uncomfortable. I've definitely had people who have tried it and like
yeah,
have some discomforts afterwards, and it's like, ouch.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, like it burns. It is not a comfy option. And a lot of our garlic is like conventionally grown, right? So then you're taking something and you're inserting it into your vagina straight where your baby is, and that's a permeable membrane. Like there's just a lot of things that you are not great. But again, if you're passionate about it and that's your go-to and you've done it before, cool. Like I don't care. But I do think there are better options. So,
Right. Yeah, steaming, like I mean, as far as suppositories go, I believe that they absolutely work. I don't
yeah.
know. I have to test. It's not like something that I have a lot of firsthand experience with. Actually, I don't know if I have any firsthand experience using suppositories because I use steaming.
Yeah.
And so if steaming works, then I don't go towards the suppository because it's already resolved, and
Yeah.
steaming is like less disruptive, I feel like,
Yes,
of just,
absolutely.
yeah.
Mhm.
I think one of the cool things about steaming as well is that it releases, right? It releases the
Mhm.
skin and the skin cells, right? Like,
Mhm.
so whereas a suppository can be, absorbed, the steaming creates a release,
Yes, absolutely.
right? Like the sweating reaction or whatever that is. Like it opens the pores and creates a release, like, in that way as well. So the garlic, or like, these stronger herbs, they do that, but they do it so strong,
Yes,
you know?
exactly. Yeah. And yeah, like I love it because it is an herbal approach, right? But it's just when we look at it from a pregnancy perspective, we have to be more careful because it's, all we have separating us from the outside world and the baby is just the vagina and the cervix. And so we have to be really mindful of what we're putting there because yeah, like that's not very much protection, right? And we don't know.
Oh my gosh, Amber, can you please write up your case study about
Yeah.
one of your clients or, if you have two or whatever, about the GBS positive and then steaming and then the negative result.
Yeah.
Because honestly, a lot of people have been asking.
Yeah.
And I'm always
Yeah.
like, I don't know, nobody can get that test. That
Yeah.
test
Yeah. I know. In the
you
hospital, they can't.
you pay for it. And so, you have the results, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Luckily, I like to answer questions. And so I was like, I will pay $75 for this question, right?
I
Like,
know, Steve Carrier's Midwife. Okay,
yeah.
so what are the results? I mean, that's a really cool one that I
Yeah.
feel like is being uncovered during the STEAM Awareness Week. Every year, I just look at this as a time period to really kind of like uncover more about what's going on with steaming,
Yeah.
And so, anyways, that's a really cool one. I feel like this year, a lot of people are gonna be steaming after their GBS.
Yeah. I hope
Yeah.
so. I really do. And also, I mean, what we see it doing for labor is amazing too. So I just think pregnancy is such I mean, it's postpartum pregnancy is such a great time to be introduced to steaming. And as far as like the labor prep process goes, so what we have seen is that most of our clients who steam following the protocol, meaning they're not, just doing it once, every few days or whatever, but they are steaming every day and they're following the protocol. Um, we see that they dilate to 6 centimeters almost completely without any discomfort. So like they're contracting, right? And they're experiencing labor, but they're going, I don't know if I'm in labor. And we're like, looking at the timing and we're going, yeah, yeah. And with the people who've had more than one baby, they're like, this just does not feel the same, and my first ever client that did this, it was her 7th baby, because I'm in Utah. It's a pretty common thing out here, right? So I mean, obviously, like, her body what has done this, right? But she was 9 centimeters and saying, I don't think I'm in labor, you guys. I don't think I'm in labor, because she'd been steaming pregnancy and in labor, and it was removing so much of the discomfort that she literally could not wrap her head around the fact that she was in labor. So then, like, we're like, okay, but you are, so why don't we go get in the tub? Because she really wanted a water birth. So she gets in the tub and she's in there for 3 minutes, and then she goes, oh, I think I can feel him. I'm like, okay, cool. Like, yeah, that makes sense, because you were 9 centimeters. Yeah, like,
Wow.
yeah. So then she reaches in the water and she brings up this 3-month-old size baby. He was 11 pounds.
It was, oh my God.
Yeah.
You're telling me she birthed with that much comfort with a big old baby like
Yeah,
that?
big old baby. Full, like,
Yeah.
seriously, he came out of the water and I was like, what? Because,
Okay, wait. So did she do the call? Like, did she do the throat sound a
no,
little bit?
she just
Hold the baby up.
Yeah, I mean, again, 7th baby. It's a little, the passenger part is a little bit, but still, it was incredible. So, I mean, that was my first experience with steaming for labor prep. And I was like, I am sold. Like, this, every client is getting this, right? And so, yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
And somebody's saying the same thing in the chat. You just see a big old wow.
Yeah, right. Like, and that's how it felt, experiencing this. It was just like, goodness, but yeah, as I've implemented it for all of my clients, I do see consistently up to 6 centimeters with very little discomfort. And I wouldn't say that it's necessarily shortening the labor phase across the board.
Okay.
However, I do think that it gives some ease that isn't there, especially for the first time moms, because it's so, first time is hard. It's generally longer. The progress is generally like a little bit more, you have more plateaus as you're getting toward full dilation. And so steaming is a great tool for those first time moms, because it feels good. It helps. It's relaxing everything. But with a first time mom, the big piece is the baby, and they like how they're coming through the pelvis, and as the pelvis is moving. And so I think that's why it doesn't necessarily speed it up, right? Because that just has to be a slow process, and that's okay. Like, we don't need to rush through birth. And I think that's a big thing that culturally we're coming up against as well.
Okay. So you don't find, first of all, well, the other thing is you don't have non-STEAM clients. You only have STEAM clients.
Yeah. Now, the past 2 years, I've only had steam clients.
So if you were to go back and statistically look at, and also I know this is not like midwives, this is not like where midwives are in life. Like, you all have this other special skill, If you were to work with a researcher and you were to look at all of your clients, your non-STEAM clients versus all of your STEAM clients, you don't think that there would be faster labor time with your STEAM clients, like overall, like on average?
Overall,
And that's fine.
hard.
You're
Yeah,
honest.
no,
That's what I'm looking for. Like, you don't have
yeah.
to.
No, I think if you look at the multiple, so anyone who's had more, has already had a baby, I do think it is faster.
Oh,
Mhm.
okay.
But not like
Right.
significantly so, right? Like, not like you're going from 8 hours to 2, right? It's just,
Okay.
but it is still, maybe 2 or 3 hours shorter. Yeah. So, but the first time mom, what was that?
Yeah. So but that's not your takeaway. Your takeaway is not that. Like, if you're talking to your midwife friends, you're not like, hey, there's faster labors. Your takeaway is that the moms have more ease.
Mm-hmm.
They're getting that opening to 6 centimeters
Yes.
with more ease and more, I guess more fluidly, right? Like, they're
Yeah.
not getting stuck at, I remember, oh my gosh, and I've only been at a couple births, so sorry. But I was at my friend's birth because she wanted me there, even though I was like freaked out. And she was stuck at like 2 centimeters
Mhm.
for like days.
Yeah.
And she did get transferred out of a birth center from a midwife
Yeah.
to a hospital where she was then given an epidural,
Hmm. Yeah.
pretty
Yeah.
immediately.
And that, that sometimes does wonders, especially if there's a history of trauma, any kind of like pelvic trauma, right? Like we will see people get stuck. And I think that's one way steaming actually helps, right? Because it's sort of activating in a low stress situation. There's not stress, right? But you're associating that feeling with something good and relaxed. And then if you continue that steaming in labor, then those same hormones are going to get released. Like, oh, I've been doing this for the last 2-3 weeks, and it's something I associate with being safe and relaxed. And I think that that's
Yeah.
part of why it can help get people past that curve. But it doesn't always work, because sometimes there's just other things happening, right? Like,
Okay. Okay.
so, and I wish that there was one thing that as a midwife I could be like, yeah, that we do this thing and we're guaranteed a butter birth, right? But that's not life.
Butter birth?
Yeah, smooth as
No.
butter.
Yeah, okay, so you, even with steaming, have seen people get stuck. No, because you said that you feel like people can get to 16 centimeters without that discomfort.
Yep.
Have you
Yep.
seen people get stuck before 6 centimeters?
Um,
Or do you,
yeah, I
with the
have.
steaming?
Yeah, I have. Only a couple times. And again, I think it's because there's other things happening. Um,
Right.
and I think,
There's sometimes a lot of interruption and in the home environment. It's just
yeah,
not conducive to
exactly.
just.
Lots of texts. I wish phones could be banned at births.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so one time a doula called me in and she was just like, my client's contractions stopped, and I was just like, okay. She's like, can you get a steam chair over here? So I went across town and I took the steam chair. And it was just so busy. The husband was loud talking on the phone and they were all texting and talking to family members about, yeah, she's in labor. Yeah, okay. Well, like it was just like,
Yeah. And you walk in and you're like, no wonder.
yeah. So
Yeah.
she steamed and then fell asleep.
Oh,
And then
yeah.
she woke up, after several hours and then had her contractions and her baby.
Yeah.
Um, it progressed at that point.
Yeah.
And also I think the husband was like asleep, so
Mhm.
like it was like, it was clearly there was like a fact with how
Yeah.
distracted her and her husband were, because she was also there, oh well, taking the calls and on the
Yeah.
texts
Yep.
too.
And it's that distraction. And I think that's why when you are able to start with the seaming in pregnancy, it does better. Like, because if I feel like when you just put it into labor, it can help, right? I have seen it do amazing things where, someone was stuck at like she was at 6 centimeters and just kept kind of being there. And then I was like, why don't we steam? And then within 30 minutes, her baby was born, right? And so I have seen it do that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's amazing, but it was her third baby, right? So there were just other things happening, some kind of tension or whatever. But I think that um because it is such a gentle nudge that like we have to almost use it with that space built around it, right? Like we have to make room for the gentle nudge rather than just throwing it into a chaotic environment and being like, it's gonna work, because it doesn't always, right? Like we have to build the
Okay.
whole,
Gotcha.
yeah, yeah. But I do think
Wow.
I mean, yeah, it's so helpful. I've seen it just over and over again. I love it.
Wow. Okay, so what would you want other midwives to know about steaming?
Oh,
What
that's
would you want them to know? Like, and because me and Amber, for everybody else, we have been out here on these streets, which for me, I really mean the Instagram feed. We've been out here on this Instagram feed with midwives attacking steaming.
hmm
And, not all midwives are for steaming.
yeah.
Um, But to be fair, not all midwives were educated about steaming from other midwives. Like the sources that they have and why they're opposed to steaming is really just misinformation from media.
Yeah,
Articles
exactly.
that that are poorly quoting doctors who are not using any medical studies to base their
Yes.
foundation or even case studies,
Yeah.
right? So we
Just their
know where
personal opinion.
we
Yeah.
know where the misinformation is, but some midwives are like will take the position to be adamantly against
Yeah.
it. What would you want, but now, so what I always want to distinguish is this is somebody who doesn't know about,
Yeah.
right? This
Mhm.
is somebody who's formed an opinion based on no actual case studies,
Mhm.
no actual evidence,
Mhm.
right? So you are somebody who is a midwife who has an evidence-based, like you have evidence on what steaming has been able to do for your clients,
Yeah.
and work with all of your clients with steaming, and based on the numbers that you were saying of how many clients you take, I mean, you're probably in the, you know, you've probably steamed 40 to 80 clients, at
Mhm.
this point,
Yeah.
like
Yeah. Mhm.
80
Yeah.
clients.
Yeah. About 80. Mhm.
You have like actually a big load.
I mean,
You actually
yeah.
have a big load of
Yeah.
information,
Mhm.
cases about steaming. What would you want like other midwives to know?
Yeah, I think the primary thing that I would want midwives to know is that I have never seen any harm come from it. I have never seen it induce labor. I think it's so crucial to talk about the fact that it is not labor induction. And I think the benefits just far outweigh any perceived risk if you're thinking about, oh, well, what if they burn their labia? Like, I mean, just teach them not to sit on hot steam. Like that, it's just really simple, right? And I think it's such an easy thing that sets up a parent for a slow postpartum. So, like when you're starting it in pregnancy, you're teaching them to dedicate at least 10 minutes for themselves in the middle of this crazy life transition. And that really is in line with the midwifery model of care, and I think that that's the biggest things that I would say. Like it's only furthering your mission, and it's not any risk, and it's not a labor induction. So
I love it. And then as far as the benefits, you say the benefits outweigh the risks. What are the benefits that you have
yeah,
seen?
so
Just
I would
in short.
yeah, in short, I'd say more ease in labor, occasionally faster labors, better healing postpartum, which we didn't even get to because, tangents. But most of my clients,
Oh yeah.
yeah, most of my clients are done completely bleeding by a week and a half postpartum. So, and I think it's the steaming because it's consistently, you know, wasn't like that before. So,
And this is with steaming postpartum. You're talking about steaming
no, this
postpartum,
is
not
steaming
the
in labor. Yeah, because most of my clients won't steam postpartum. But yeah,
Interesting.
yeah, yeah. Like it just, I think, yeah, there's many things that I think are happening there.
You also mentioned using it as a tool when somebody is GBS positive.
Mhm. Yes, that's a huge one. I mean, that's hard because we haven't fully seen it every time, right? But I think it would be really cool to get a group of midwives who are willing to, pay that extra cost to get more details on that. Because I do think it's an effective tool. I think that's probably why it originated postpartum as well. It's like an infection prevention measure. So,
Right.
yeah.
Which is the second leading cause of mortality, right? So
Exactly.
I mean, that's major.
Yeah.
And then you also mentioned being able to use it when, for some reason, somebody's stuck
Yeah,
with their
exactly. Yep.
breast.
Yep. It can really help those stalled labors. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, Amber, thank you so much. You've been so gracious to share all of this with us.
Yeah.
So I know that you have four little ones, and I've taken up a full hour of your time. The next talk is can steaming reduce cesarean rates? I don't know if you were planning on staying or if you have to get running.
I mean, I do have a postpartum visit that I have to go to at 12:30. Otherwise, I'd love to stay.
Okay, okay, cool. Well, I'm going to have to bid you farewell then. I cannot wait to capture clips of this and share it with
Yeah.
people. Yeah.
Yep.
And
I'm happy to answer any questions you guys have. I'll put my chat or my email in here for later.
okay. Yes, how can people where I don't think you told people where you were located. You
Oh
mentioned
yeah,
you
I didn't. So right now I have a home birth practice in Utah. However, I am actually kind of in a transition period where I am closing it down, um, just to have time with my kids mostly. Um, and I'm actually starting a really cool new program that I'm doing that where I function as a postpartum midwife. And one of
oh,
my things I'm gonna do is steaming for
I
people.
know it is.
So,
I know it is.
so because I just, yeah, there's so much focus on birth, and I want to start taking care of people postpartum because it's just,
Oh,
yeah, it's my passion in life. So,
I know. They need it.
yeah.
Um, okay, well, all of that is really cool. And then how can people find you on Instagram?
So right now I just have my new project, right? And I have hardly anything going on over there, but it's at Oak Springs, Utah.
At Oak Springs,
Yeah, here,
Utah.
I'll put it in here. Yep.
Okay. And then
And
you
again,
have
this is in its little infancy. Oops, I didn't even add the Utah. It's just brand new, just freshly birthed into the world.
hey, okay. And then you also have a website. And what's your website?
So actually, I don't even, again, it's just Birth Mind Body was up and now it's closing, but so
Okay.
Oak Springs is coming. So right now, Instagram is all I've got. Yeah. So
Okay.
yeah,
Okay. Wow. I feel like a lot of people are probably going to want to ask you some more
yeah,
questions.
I'd
So
love it.
anyhow, you know how to get to Amber. All right. Well, I have to let you go then. Thank
Yeah,
you so
thank
much.
you.
I will be in contact and talk to you again soon.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you, everyone.
Ciao.
Bye.
Wow, that was really cool, huh, you guys? Let me stop the recording.